Hey, all gearing up for Texas and doing some experimentation in my backyard. I wanted to show you the thing that stumped us a little bit last year. That was the cable cam, and we were testing it and getting it all set up here. And you'll see it's working this time around. We've got the motors figured out, we got the speed figured out. And it's got an auto looping feature where it's going to bounce back between the two spots, nice and smooth. And so, just wanted to give you all an update and a shout out because we're super excited about everything going on for Texas. All right, here I am in my backyard. I know it's going to be a little hard to see, but this is truss here that I'm looking at. I do have a weighted base here. So it's a metal plate, and then we have some concrete blocks and some bricks. So that's probably 100 and 120 pounds. And then each one of these sections is 15 feet for this particular type of truss, the tri truss. And so I've got one pillar over here, and then I know it's hard to see, but this other one over there. We're not going to need 15 feet at the venue, but that's what I had, and that's what I'm using. So basically going to go at about 12 feet, I think, for the main line, and then just above that, maybe 14 feet for the safety line. And we'll try all that out here in my backyard, see how that does. So we can try that cable cam. It's working. Finally. We'll have to figure out the speed thing and the safety cable thing, but uh, we're further than we were in March, so that's good. So now we have two endpoints, one on the left. We're getting the endpoint to the right. To set the speed, we used a trim mode in the controller to do that. And I think it's 50% speed right now. So we can probably even bring that down lower just to see if we can get a.
That's actually probably like 25 or 20%.
Okay, this might be 20%, but we'll see how slow we can get it because we wanted a slow crawl. So. All right, y'all, Justin did it. Introducing the Pro Aim Skywalker. We've got it in loop mode now at a crawl, which is what we want. And so it's basically going between its endpoints.
I just
there.
turned it off a loop mode.
Oh, okay.
I'm supposed to anyway.
But it's basically bouncing back automatically between those 2 points, which is what we want. We can control the speed, we control the in and out, and now we're about to try to rig up camera. Okay, now that we got that program, obviously this is going to take some time to play with, but we have an Xbox controller, I have an iPhone, and then we have an RS2. That's probably what we'll still use, but basically inside the software program, we're going to be going to virtual joystick if you wanted to control it from the phone. But in our case, we have a gaming controller, so it's bottom left. And then since I've already synced the Xbox controller to the gimbal, you can actually look at the gimbal and we can see that we can control that here as well. Now this is Bluetooth, so I'm a little afraid of the distance between the phone and where we're setting up the rig. So if we can find something better than a Bluetooth system, we will. But at least it's working for now at this distance, and I can kind of walk away, try to split the difference, see if we can figure out a way to keep the control. So there is dials and speed here for pan and tilt, and obviously when we have a monitor that will help as well. And so everything we're doing is going to be super slow. That's the hope, is that it's super slow and smooth, and it's just one kind of bounce back and forth. So ideally we set this and forget it for 80-90% of the time. If we need to push it into manual mode, you can. But most of the time it would be like Guy Cochran operating the Xbox controller with a phone, and they sync together. So we'll probably want to have a battery backup for the phone. And then obviously at some point we'll have to switch batteries on stuff too. So we'll figure that out as we go. I am trying to figure out how the cable cam for Pro Aim works. I'm sorry about the neighbor's dog. It barks when I talk, so I'll try to go fast with this. But so we were trying to figure out which parts in the controller allow us to program and set stuff. So it doesn't matter where the C switch is, if it's up or 2 or 3, just leave it up for now. It's all about this dial right here, this variable. It's actually for 5 because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, sorry, 5, 6. I'm sorry. So this is 6. I don't know why. That's just how the numbers work for the channels. And so, yeah, if we set it all the way to the left or counterclockwise, it allows us to move independently. Now, you'll see that it'll stop right here. That's because I've programmed a stop point. And so to basically start programming a stop point, I've noticed if I go to the left, I can go down left and up left, and that will set that point. And then if I go the other way, it's going to eventually also run into a stop over here. There it goes. I was still holding the controller. Now, if I want to extend the stop point, I'm going to keep holding the throttle, and then I'm going to go up on the left until it goes a little further. I'll release it, and now that should be the new stop point. Let's check by going back a little bit.
So basically in manual mode, you can still have stop points and safety points, which is good because we're going to want that to make sure we don't hit the end of the rail here on both sides. So as I swing back the other way, it should still keep the other stop point. There it is, perfect. And so the last thing we're going to do is switch, or dial, I should say, this knob for 6 all the way to the right for channel 6, and then it starts because my throttle is up. Let's make sure that's going okay. So in theory, it's going to keep going back and forth between those two stop points from now on, and it'll kind of just slow down, stop, and then turn back around. Great, that seems to be working. Now, the other trick that I've learned is there's an extra switch right here. So this actually allows me to have 2 different curves. So if I go into the menu here, I'm going to go up to throttle curve. So you'll see there's an idle up. That's when the switch is down. That's the idle. And if I go up, it goes into normal. Now, normal, as you can tell, is another speed setting, another variable. So I can have a separate curve, which allows it to go faster. In our case, I just overdid it because it was too fast there, but it seems to still be working. I'm going to turn that off just so it doesn't break everything going on here. But as you can tell, now we're back in that idle mode, which is the lower setting. So basically what's cool is we can have like a slower mode for the same stuff, and then we can flip it up to the faster mode as needed, and then also set those speeds in the curve for that faster mode. Now, I will say when we're setting our endpoints, we should definitely set them to the faster speed, just so we have enough time for the momentum to slow down before it gets to the end of the slack on each side. So, okay, what else can I tell you? So basically, just to summarize, when we're in manual mode, we're going to basically use this to set endpoints. So down left, down up left to set the first one, and then the opposite way is just up right in theory. And then your throttle here controls the speed. And so, oh yeah, I should also say, so if I go into the throttle setting, I've noticed that let's go down to throttle curve, which is this second menu. So 17, starting at 18%, that's when the motor starts moving. And so I've set my first kind of slower setting, basically up to 25%. So 17 to 25% is the range of the speed that we're currently moving with the slider. And that's all the speed we really need. And what's cool too is like max speed is now 25%. If I slow this down, you'll see we can still kind of crawl a little bit slower, and we have a little bit more control of how much speed we come through, and that will allow us to go a little bit slower. Now, in this case, it stopped because I went too slow, and also because it's slightly going uphill. So we've got to kind of figure out what that's going to look like from a power perspective, because eventually, it's going to not have enough power to go up the hill the opposite way. So there is kind of a minimum speed, and it's probably about this speed. So that's something that we have to be aware of, is there will be some speed that's needed to perform the functions that we need. So. And then again, I'll just quickly flip it into 2. You'll see the curve change. Yep, you see how it bumps up. I made those settings a little bit faster, but I'm going to leave it in this first mode because they're too fast and I didn't have the endpoints calibrated correctly for now. So, all right, what else can I tell you? So the displays here, this is kind of the most important part, I think, of like what joystick does what. And again, 6 is the one that I'm most concerned about with turning on and off the looping functions. So if I could figure out a way to reprogram 6 somewhere else, that would be ideal. But what I'm going to do next is basically do a firmware update to this controller, because it should allow us to have 10 channels. And I'm hoping that I'll have the ability to control this switch as well. Because basically in the menu, I see switch A, B, and D, but I do not see the switch. Now, another thing I'll say that I am trying to work on is basically turning this into a kill switch that basically overrides the movement. But for now, it's not switching, and I had it working a moment ago, so I will figure out how to set that and program that, and then I'll try the firmware update. Found out some cool unlocks I want to talk about. So basically, you can set these switches A, B, C, and D to different parameters. And so I went ahead and did that. The first switch I've reprogrammed because it was in sport mode or normal mode for the Skywalker. That didn't do anything. So this mode is now between channel 6. So down is off, and actually, yeah. So before it was basically this dial. So I guess all the way to the right is on, and then all the way to the left is off. So down, I think, is basically in the off position, which is left, and then up is on. So now that it's in this position, it's basically going to bounce between the waypoints that we set. So hopefully that's not confusing, but basically it was this dial before. Now I've made it into the switch, so it's easy for us to know hey, we're in auto mode where it's going to bounce back and forth. Or if we want to go to program mode, we basically flip this down. And then now we're in manual mode again, basically, or program mode. So we can come here. We still basically go down on the stick, down left to set the first point. So say, hey, I'm setting a point, and then up left says this is the left point. Then I'm going to go right, and then it should just be up right to set the second point. So we're going to flip back into auto mode and just say go. And then in theory, it's going to bounce back and forth between those 2 points that we just set. So there's the first point, and then it's going to come back and do the second point. Great. Now that I've shortened the throw, we can also go into the next step, which is the speed. So this is now idle is the bottom one and normal is the top. So idle, I set a curve for, and that's the slower curve that you see now with our throttle all the way up. This is the max speed, pretty slow. We can actually go a little bit slower if we want. There's a minimum speed that we'll eventually hit. But yeah, we pretty much probably want this kind of slow crawl most of the time anyways. But okay, so let's kick it into sports mode, or sorry, not sports mode, but normal mode, which is this going up here. And you'll see that it actually goes a lot faster and it takes a little bit longer to slow down on each end. So that's really cool if we need to reset something, but it gets a little bit dangerous in the sense of like we need more stopping time on each side. So I'm going to flip that back down. Now we can set the speed of both of these settings as its own curve. So to do that, we're going to hold down the OK button. Sometimes it doesn't go. We're going to go to the functions menu and we're going to go to the second page, throttle curve. And so that's depending on which one you have set. So I'm going to drop the throttle. And we found out that basically below when you set the lowest number to 17, that's basically as soon as you touch it, it kicks on, and then 17 is off. So I guess that's 18 and so on. But this allows us to have more granular control. So the lowest number starts at 17 because 18 turns on the motors. And then basically in this lower throttle mode, this down mode, we're only using numbers 17 through 25. And then if I click up to this faster one, you'll see 17 through 37 with basically step changes between each one. I might even go slower for the second one, to be honest with you, because it does take off still kind of quick. But just so you know, that's kind of how we do it is we basically flip the mode. Oops, try not to hit the throttle, but you flip the mode and that will allow you to switch between a slower and a faster setup. So before we thought it was both of these dials and this. So just so everybody knows, it was just channel 6, but we've deprogrammed that. And now we've programmed this switch basically so that way if it's up, it's going to be in auto mode. And so we just give it throttle and it'll basically do the auto as needed, and we can control the speed of that back and forth. And then if we want to reset the points, we flip down on the switch and then we can actually set the points as needed. So another cool thing, I'm going to set this back in auto mode so that it'll go here in the background. This switch basically does nothing. However, this switch is now programmed as a kill switch. So if something's about to crash, we can just hit this down and it'll stop it in its move wherever it is. If we need to get to the battery or whatever we need to do, get to the gimbal, we can flip it back on and it'll just resume its previous settings and movement. So to get to that kill switch, what I'm going to do is hold down cancel to get out of this menu. All right, we're going to go down to switches assign. And so throttle hold is switch D. So this is A, B, C, sorry, C, D. And so right now it's in the up position, which is off. And when I flip it down, it's in the on position, which kills the motor, right? So that's the thing we need to set there. Make sure that's set to D. And then the other setting we need to go to is throttle hold, which is just below that. And then throttle hold is on. And then you set the value of when it is on, what do you want it to set the motor to? And it's 0%. So hit that. It's on, engaged, 0%. Flip it off, not engaged, movement, once it finishes the end of the curve there. So those are the things that we did to basically set the top switches. We're not worrying about the rotary dials. We have better speed control for this layer, and then we have our settings of the in and out points here. So that's basically it. I said this in another video, but I'll say it again. If for some reason the Skywalker and the controller aren't linking, you turn off the controller, you hold down the bind key, which is basically the sync button, and you flip it back on. And then it should pair up with the Skywalker. That's what we're getting wrong the first part. So I'm trying to figure out the slowest speed possible. Again, I'm sorry about the dog. Just under 3. So 3 is 23%. So like 22% seems to be where the system will continuously move back and forth without losing momentum or stopping. So I've kind of set an in and out point, and you can kind of see the speed of that. Now, I guess the other question is how far away are we from the stage when this thing is moving? Um, and obviously, it still moves kind of faster than we probably want. So I guess the other question is, could we basically jump in here and look at the motor to see if there's another wheel that we can add or switch out, like a gear motor, basically that helps drive this thing. If I kind of jump in there, oops, I just bumped it, but there's this large wheel in the center that gets driven by the motor right here. So maybe we can like stop down that motor and go smaller, so we lose top speed, but then we gain that slower speed torque, basically. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's a possibility. Jeff, just wanted to hear your thoughts. Thanks, dude. All right. Obviously, I've taken some stuff apart. This motor sits on the outside, so I believe we skipped the bottom hole. I have photos of that, so it sits in there pretty well. Basically, I had to remove this pulley. I don't know the names. This was in there, so this goes like that. Anyways, so yeah, that was sitting up top in here, and then basically the spacers were there with these two pieces up top. So within there is the bigger pulley system. So the drive shaft there in the middle is this side, and it's grooved, so you can see it sits in like that to help drive this around. So hopefully we can find a replacement for this guy that's smaller. I will say that there is a layer of like gunk already from the line. So obviously it's like wearing down the rope with the friction from the pulling or whatever. So I don't know if that's going to make a difference. And then, like I said, this is just under 5 inches. So if we maybe do half of that, honestly, I might get a couple different sizes to experiment with. I'm going to take apart this contraption too to see if that helps us at all understand like these components of the whole. Um, but yeah, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too hard.
All right, y'all. I want to talk about a few of the modifications that I made. It is going slower, and that's because I've updated the wheel. It's kind of hard to see. I'm going to see if I can get in there though. But you see how it's much smaller, pulley in there. Justin was absolutely right. He suggested or thought that basically the motor needed to be placed higher. So in the lower position, it didn't have enough of an arc from this low to a higher back down low. So without that tension, the pulley was just slipping a lot. So yeah, basically I made some new custom holes. I drilled those out and put a nut on the back with some washers and set this just a little bit higher on the frame here. So the motor is sitting higher to help kind of create that upside down V, I guess you can call it. And so yeah, now we're kind of in this slower crawl, which is nice and smooth. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of flip around and walk the same speed as this camera is. That way you can get a feel for the slowness that it can have. And yeah, so we're basically about a third of this original speed. And it has more torque, which is awesome. So let me go ahead and spin. That way you get a perspective here. It's just my backyard, but gives you an idea of what the speed's going to be like because I'm trying to match basically the 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 cable cam here. It's hard to do this while looking over my shoulder back at the cable cam, but that kind of slow, steady move I think will be great. So yeah, I think it'll work pretty well. We'll get the speed down the way it is, and the only thing is, you saw at the end it kind of jitters at the end, so maybe that shock absorption, we'll try that out and see if that makes any difference. Just got to figure out where it is. So it's kind of where we are with the new pulley system. I'm actually pretty happy with how it's turning out, how it looks. Uh, Again, washers, nut on the back, 3 washers there. This plate is now spaced off of it. So I had 4 screws before, now we have 3, but it should be fine, especially at these lower speeds. And then if we ever need to go back up to the higher gear ratio, we can easily do that as well. Basically, we just have to remove those bolts and switch out the gear. So it probably takes about 10 minutes to really get in there and do what we need to do to make it happen. So, all right. So just so everybody knows, I've got the small pulley, and this is the high throttle mode, the top throttle mode. So 13 is like the cutoff. So if I turn it all the way down, it'll stop moving. And then 13, then 30 is kind of the next step up. So as I come up, you'll see we'll get the speed there at the lower end. So you can go below 1, right? There's still places below 1 that you can go slower. But the nice thing is we can kind of ramp up as needed here. So I'll start all the way on that side and I'll start slow and then I'll ramp up to the faster speed. So that thing can still freaking haul. And it's like I said, it's 75% on the smallest motor. Like, so it's loud. Yeah, it's a little bit loud, but honestly, there's no way we're gonna need that much speed for what we're doing. Just sitting at the bar, getting some shots. So this kind of resetting speed is still freaking fast. And most of the time we're gonna be in that slower speed, so I'll kick it down and I'll just let that go. But it's kind of our crawl speed, basically anything above 1. And that was what I was showing in the last video. So, but yeah, we have the ability to kick it into that high gear as needed. But most of the time, we're going to probably be fine at that slower speed. So I will say this thing has locked up if I stop or go too slow. So keeping that momentum and that movement, I think, is going to be helpful because there is a chance that the cable cam gets stuck on the wire somewhere and then the motor just spins out. So I don't know exactly how to prevent that yet. So we can kind of think about that. Maybe having that second safety cable line will make a difference there. But overall, this is going pretty well, and super happy with where we're at. The last thing I want to show everybody is this new system here. This is like a carabiner that's used for climbing. It's rated for 11,000 pounds. And the whole hope is essentially we don't put any knots in our system. So we feed it in such a way that the tension, is relieved across multiple strain points. And so then that is what we can use with a crank or what have you. I have one on each side now, and that just allows us to easily tie off the line without having to cut the line, with not having to knot up the line. And so knots apparently reduce it by like 70%, whereas this kind of method retains the strength. And so this line is ridiculous. It's some of the strongest line you can get. It's rated for like 8,000 pounds or something. So yeah, but you can kind of see that. It does stop a little more abruptly now with the smaller motor, so it doesn't have the same smoothness, probably because of the rotations or what have you. But it's still very controllable and very cool to see it kind of come across and dance around. Again, that does have that little jitter right at the end, so we'll try that shock absorption and see if it makes a difference. So